This is a 3D printed damaged Darth Vader helmet from the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. It was printed completely out of ABS material and no sanding was required to achieve its gloss-like finish. And I'm going to show you how I made it. Let's go. What's up you guys, my name is Mark and welcome to my channel. I purchased the files for this build from the Do3D website and I'll have a link in the description below so that you can purchase them too. I've been wanting to build a Darth Vader helmet for a while now, but printing the large dome in ABS without an enclosure kind of scared me. However, I eventually decided to take the leap and I think it turned out alright. As I've mentioned before on this channel, I have an extraordinarily small head. So after messing around in Mesh Mixer for a while, I determined I could print this helmet at 90% of its original file size. This is great because 1, I'll use less filament, and 2, it will be a bit easier to print in ABS without an enclosure. Now, I know there are some of you out there that are going to comment and tell me, you shouldn't print ABS without an enclosure because it's toxic. And although that might be true, when I print ABS, I do it in a room that's isolated from the rest of my house and it's properly ventilated. I keep an eye on my prints using webcams so I don't have to go into the room unless there's a failure and I need to restart the print. If you decide to print in ABS, just be safe and do some research beforehand on the fumes that are expelled from melting the material. With that said, I printed the majority of the parts on my Ender 3 S1 and they all turned out fantastic without the use of any enclosure. The only part I couldn't fit on my Ender 3 was the dome, so I printed it on my Ender 5 Plus. As I assumed, the dome did not print well due to warping and cracking, so being the cheap SOB that I am, I made a makeshift enclosure out of cardboard. It's not pretty by any means, but it did help keep the heat in and eventually I got it to print successfully. Kind of. Even with my makeshift enclosure, there were still some cracks on the side of the dome, but I used a soldering iron and some spare ABS filament to patch these up. And yes, I did wear a respirator when doing this. My soldering job doesn't look very pretty, but it doesn't really matter because of how I'm going to be smoothing these parts later in the video. I have all the pieces laid out here after printing. The top and bottom of the helmet were printed in 2 separate parts and will connect together using magnets. There are also several small pieces that will be glued to the helmet after smoothing. And now, to answer the question that you might have had since the beginning of this video, which is how do I smooth these parts without sandpaper? And the answer is the use of an acetone vapor bath. For the small parts, I have a Tupperware container I line with paper towels and spray with acetone. I place the parts inside the container on a platform, being careful not to let the pieces come in direct contact with the acetone-soaked paper towels. I close the lid and after about 15 minutes, I pull the parts out. Try not to touch the parts when taking them out because they will be soft and sticky from the acetone. And as you can see, once dry, they are super glossy and smooth. I repeat this same process with the larger parts using a 32-quart storage container. When using a larger container, it's actually helpful to dump some acetone in the bottom in addition to spraying the paper towels. I use a tin baking tray as my platform and also attach some PC fans to the lid for better circulation of the vapor. If you're interested in seeing how to make one of these vapor baths, you can click the video linked in the corner of the screen. After about 30 minutes, I take the part out and inspect it. As you can see, there is still some waviness on the surface of the part where the layer lines used to be. To mitigate this, I usually wait until the part is completely dry and then put it back into the acetone vapor bath another 2 to 3 times. Here is a part that was only bathed once and the layer lines are still very prominent. The part behind it was bathed twice and a lot less of the layer lines can be seen on its surface. Now, to smooth the dome, I had to upgrade yet again to an even larger storage container. The larger the part is and the more surface area it has, the longer it will need to sit in the bath. After about 45 minutes, I take the dome out and although it's extremely smooth, I notice that there is a large buckle that has formed. This is because, unfortunately, I left it in the acetone bath a little too long and the weight of the part caused it to warp and create a deformation halfway down the slant of the dome. I can also tell it was left in the bath too long because of the few bubbles that have formed on the part's backside. This was really frustrating and unfortunate, but since this part was so difficult to print in the first place and the printing time was almost 3 days, I decided to just roll with it and not reprint it. I'll probably replace it at some point in the future, but for now, it is what it is. This just goes to show you guys that everybody has issues when doing projects, so don't get discouraged when things don't come out perfectly the first time. One downside to acetone smoothing I've found is that fingerprints and smudges are extremely prominent, especially on black ABS. To avoid this, I rinse each part with Dawn dish soap to remove any already formed smudges and apply a layer of clear coat. I don't really have a specific type or brand, I'm just using whatever I have on hand at the time. Now that all the parts are smoothed and coated, I install the magnets. The top connector and back of the mask require 8x2mm magnets. To connect the top and bottom portions of the helmet require 6x2mm magnets. I use super glue to put them in place and then test their functionality. The 6x2mm magnets connecting the upper and lower helmet come apart with minimal force, and unfortunately I don't think they are going to be strong enough to hold up the dome and stay on my face without falling off. So since these two pieces of the helmet are not necessary to come apart for installation, I decide to super glue them together and then solder the backside with some extra ABS filament. Now I don't have to worry about them coming apart while wearing the helmet. I use super glue to attach the top connector to the dome. The magnets on the back of the helmet are also a bit weak, so I reinforce the connection by gluing a few elastic bands to one side and belt strapping with Velcro to the other. This allows the mask to still come on and off easily, but keeps it in place when it's on my head. Plus, this way the back neck piece always stays attached to the main helmet, so I'll never lose it. I use some acrylic paint and a small paintbrush to highlight some of the helmet's details. This is obviously supposed to be a damaged helmet, so some metallic gray and a bit of dark red are incorporated around the jagged edges to bring it to life. I love doing fine detail work because there's really no right or wrong way to do it. Just use your imagination and have fun with it. In addition to the acrylic paint, I use a chrome and gold paint pen to capture a few more of the helmet's small details. The greebles are also colored using a chrome and bronze paint pen. After the paint is dry, I use super glue to attach the greebles to the top and front of the helmet. I cut a square out of a black neck gaiter and glue it to the back of the front grate. A scissors is used to remove the excess material and it is glued to the inside of the helmet. I also glue a piece of the neck gaiter behind the lower grate. PCBWay was kind enough to print me the lens for this build in clear resin. Using a 3D printing service such as PCBWay to get crystal clear lenses and visors for my cosplay helmets has been a game changer. I cover the lens in black window tint and use a heat gun to push out all the air bubbles. After the lens is formed, I cut the excess tint from the sides and glue it into place on the helmet. I also add some red window tint on the inside of the helmet behind the lens. I personally like the look of the black eyes on Vader's helmet, but I also wanted a hint of red to be there so that when the light hits it in a certain way, it gives it this cool effect. And I must say that I love how it turned out. After that, everything is pretty much done. But I don't want to stop there. One of my favorite scenes in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series is when you can see the red glow of Vader's lightsaber on his face after his helmet is damaged. To achieve a similar ambiance, I'm going to use some red LEDs and a AAA battery holder with an integrated switch. I'm going to glue the 4 LEDs on the inside of the helmet to give the appearance of a red glow on my face. This is a very simple circuit and can be soldered up with basic soldering skills. Technically, I should be using a resistor because the voltage of the circuit is 3 volts and the red LEDs are only rated for 2.2 volts, but I didn't really feel like paying and waiting for the resistor to ship, so I'm just going to use what I have, and if the LEDs burn out, it is what it is. I took a risk. If I was going to be using a resistor, it would need to be 40 ohms based on the voltage and current ratings of the LEDs. Okay, now finally, after getting the lights installed, here is the final product. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more content. I'll see you next time, and stay classy.